Hey guys, Brian here from Thumper Fab. Today I'm walking you through installing our new doors on your U10 PRO XL. For the first step of the assembly process, we're going to go ahead and get all our parts prepped on the table before we install them on the vehicle. I'm going to go ahead and install our trim on the front and the rear driver doors before moving on to the next step. Your trim will come in total lengths, enough for both sides of the vehicle. So what you'll do is you'll lay your trim out, roughly measure it, and then take your snips, snip through the trim, and install it on the edge of the door. You may need to trim a couple times for a nice finish, but we made sure to give you a little extra trim just in case you make any mistakes. For the next step, we're getting ready to mount our latches to our door frame assembly. For the first thing, we're going to mount our ball knobs to the latches. You'll simply thread the bolt into the knob, get it all snugged up, finally tighten it up with a 10mm socket. You'll repeat the process for all 4 latches. I'll move on to the next step. When you're assembling your latches and preparing to mount them to the vehicle, the spot you mount the ball knob on should always be away from the main body of the latch. Here you can see we have opposite latches. So the one with the red spring you'll mount on the driver's side doors, and the one with the silver spring you'll mount on the passenger side doors. With that being said, we can go ahead and move on and prepare to mount the latch to our door frame using our 1/4" button head screws. You'll simply place the latch in position, start your middle button head screw. As you can see, these holes are slotted for adjustability once you have the latch and the door mounted to the vehicle. So we won't tighten everything up until we get everything adjusted in a way that we like. And then we'll go ahead and proceed on with moving to the next step. So with our latch mounted to our front door, we're going to go ahead and repeat the same process on our rear door. You'll simply place the latch into position, use your 1/4" hardware, thread into the latch assembly. We can go ahead and snug these up with a 5/32 Allen wrench. Like I said before, there's no need to fully tighten them, as you'll most likely have to adjust the latches once you get them on the vehicle. So for the next step of our assembly process, I'm going to go ahead and install our door bushings in our hinge brackets. These will be marked with L or U based on the place it's going to go on the vehicle. This L stands for lower, so this will be our lower hinge bracket. We'll take our brass bushings and gently tap them in. I'm using a plastic hammer just so I don't defect the bushing at all. It'll provide a nice smooth opening and closing. We'll go ahead and get all these brass bushings installed, move on to the next step. The next step for prepping our hinge brackets, I'm going to install our rubber door stop through this hole located in the bracket. You'll simply slide the rubber stop through and cap it off with our M8 lock nut. With your rubber door stops loosely fastened to your upper hinge brackets, we're going to flip them over and loosely tighten them using our 13mm socket. We'll go ahead and get that tightened up before we mount our hinge brackets to our large hinge assemblies. Here you can see both our driver's side main hinge bracket assemblies. This one here with the 2 holes will be used for your front doors. This will only come if you've got a crew cab vehicle and you're doing the crew doors. Here you can see our rear hinge bracket assembly. You can tell it's the rear based on the 3 holes on this flange that's bent towards the rear of the bracket. If you're doing the installation on a 3-seat unit, you'll use the rear hinge bracket assembly to mount your front door on the vehicle, as the rear of the frame on the 3-seat and the crew is the same. So I'll give you another walk down once we have everything up on the vehicle. But just a reminder, if you're doing a 3-seat, you will use the hinge bracket assembly with 3 holes and mount your doors exactly how we're going to mount our rear door on this crew vehicle. For the next step, with our bushings installed and our door stops installed, I'm going to go ahead and fasten our hinge brackets to our hinge assembly. You'll simply slide the bracket. You can see here I'm doing the lower, as this is the lower portion of the bracket. You'll slide the bracket through the assembly, We'll get it fastened up using our long 5/16 bolt and flange lock nut. You want to be sure not to over tighten these, as it'll cause your door to move rough and not as smooth as it is designed. Here you can see I'm going to repeat the same process for the upper pivot bracket. Go ahead and get that in place. On the upper, you'll have to feed your bolt through from the bottom, and you'll use this access hole right here to get everything tightened up. We're going to go ahead and loosely snug these up. We're going to use a 1/2-inch wrench and a 1/2-inch socket, but like I said before, you don't want to over tighten these, as it can cause your door to stick or not operate smoothly. For the next step, we're going to go ahead and mount our front lower hinge mount bracket. We're going to use our M8 button heads and M8 flange lock nuts. We'll simply slide the bolt through our hinge assembly and through the bracket. You want to make sure that this bracket is mounted on the inside of our hinge assembly. Once we get both of our bolts and nuts started, we can go ahead and loosely tighten them up using a 13mm socket. So you want to follow the same procedure when you're bolting on these hinge mount brackets. We want to make sure we don't tighten everything up until we get the doors mounted on the vehicle, where we can make all of our adjustments. And once we like where the door is sitting and how it's operating, we can go ahead and tighten everything up. With our front lower mount bracket loosely tightened, we can go ahead and move on to the upper mount bracket. We'll use the same procedure. We want to make sure and mount it on the inside of our hinge assembly. We use our SEM M8 button head screws, cap it off with our M8 flange lock nuts on the inside. We'll get them all loosely tightened up, then we'll move on to our rear hinge assembly. For the next step, we're going to move on to our rear hinge assembly. We'll go ahead and mount our rear lower hinge bracket. We'll follow the same procedure that we did on the front. You'll have your bracket on the inside of the hinge assembly, and we'll use our M8 button head screws before we cap it off with our flange nylon lock nuts and get it all snugged up before moving on to the upper bracket. For the next step, we're going to go ahead and mount our rear hinge upper mount bracket. We're going to follow the same procedure as all our other mount brackets. You'll place the bracket on the inside of the hinge assembly. We'll use our M8 button heads before capping it off with our M8 flange lock nut. We'll get that loosely tightened up and get ready to mount the hinges on the vehicle. Once we have our hinges and everything else prepped, we're going to go ahead and move on to prepping the vehicle. We'll go ahead and take our wrench. I've already removed the first one. We'll go ahead and back them out, as our striker bracket for the front is going to mount in that location. You'll use your T30 Torx. Go ahead and get it removed. We'll move on to the next step. For the next step, we're going to go ahead and remove our front and rear grab handles. For the front, all you'll need is a 13mm socket. We're going to use our impact and go ahead and get these buzzed off. We're going to replace these bolts in your hardware kit, so you can go ahead and set them aside. For the next step, we're going to go ahead and remove our rear grab handle. The upper mount on the rear grab handle, you'll have to use a 6mm Allen bit, as the fastener that holds it on is inside the tube on the rear grab handle. For the lower two mounting bolts for the rear grab handle, you'll use the same 13mm socket we used on the front. For the next step, this will be on your crew installs only. We're going to go ahead and remove this plastic panel shown here. We have T30 Torx head screws as well as some plastic push pins. Once we get all that removed, we can take the plastic panel off and I'll show you the inside where we're going to modify it. So here on this inside of this B-pillar plastic that we just removed, you'll see two plastic dimples located here. These half slot shapes will tell you where you're going to drill your holes. We're going to go ahead and drill them out using our 3/8 drill bit. And you're going to aim for the center of this circle down here at the bottom. So our drill bit will go in right about there where my fingernail is. We'll go ahead and do both those. If we have to, we'll step up the hole size once we get it back installed on the vehicle. Here you can see where we've drilled the two holes that'll be used to mount our rear striker bracket. Like I said, they're at the center of this rainbow shape. Where the center point of that circle would be is exactly where we drilled the hole. We started out with our 5/16 drill bit. We went and reinstalled it. We stepped it up to a 3/8. You may be able to get away with the 5/16. It just depends on how accurate your holes are and how well your plastics are lined up from the factory. So here you can see we're going ahead and reinstalling our plastic panel with our new holes drilled in that'll allow us to mount our rear striker bracket without having to significantly cut the plastics. Once we have our holes drilled, I'll come back and reinstall the fasteners that held the panel in place. We'll go ahead and move on to the next step. Here you can see our front driver striker bracket. We're going to go ahead and install it where we removed our OEM screws. We're going to use the same M8 button heads that we were using earlier. We're going to go ahead and thread them in to the inserts provided from the factory. Once we get those started, we can go ahead and snug them up. Just as before, we want to make sure we don't fully tighten anything, as it'll eliminate the adjustment that we have built into our brackets. Here we have our rear striker bracket. On this side, we went ahead and cut the plastics out, but you don't have to do anything that significant. Like we showed you on the passenger side, you can just drill so you have access to these two holes. I'm going to go ahead and loosely fasten the striker bracket to the frame using our M8 button head screws. We'll get those snugged up before we move on. On the front, before we can mount our front hinge assembly, we're going to go ahead and remove the upper mounting bolt for the front seat assembly. We'll use our 13mm socket and we'll remove this bolt before we replace it later on. In preparation for mounting the rear hinge assembly, we're going to go ahead and take out the seat on the side that you're going to be installing the hinge on. You can simply pop it up. We'll be reusing this bolt back here when we mount our rear hinge assembly. With your rear seat out of position, we're going to go ahead and remove the seat frame. We're going to use our 6mm Allen wrench. We'll go ahead and remove the fasteners. With our fasteners removed, we can go ahead and get to these back two. Most sockets won't fit down in there, so you'll have to use an actual Allen wrench before we remove this plastic piece, which will give us access to slide our door bracket, our rear hinge bracket, in under the plastic and get everything bolted up. With our 4 seat frame mounting bolts removed, we can go ahead and lift the seat frame out. With the seat frame set aside, we'll have access to pull this plastic panel up, which will reveal our lower bolt hole location for the rear hinge mount. For the next step, we're going to go ahead and mount our rear hinge bracket assembly. We went ahead and lifted the dump bed. I'm going to come in and start with these rear mount holes first, as they'll give us a nice easy fasten since they have good access to them. We're going to use our M8 button heads just as we have before. And you want to remember, you don't want to tighten any of this up until we get all our mounting bolts started. Once we get them all started, we can return and tighten everything evenly. For the next step, I'm going to go ahead and loosely fasten our rear hinge upper mount bracket to the frame. We'll come in, this will be the same location that your grab handle was removed from. We'll use our same M8 button head screws. I'm going to go ahead and get that snugged up. Once we get that snugged up, we'll move on to the next step. Here I've went ahead and installed the mounting bolt for our rear hinge lower bracket. This will go through the bracket and through the seat frame. We're going to go ahead and get that tightened up before moving on to the front hinge assembly. Here with our bracket fully tight, you can see where the plastic that goes underneath the seat and seat frame is going to contact it. I'm going to go ahead and trim it with our box knife. Once we get it sitting all flush, we can reinstall the seat frame and the rear seat before we move on to the front hinge assembly. With our seat frame reinstalled, we can go ahead and reinstall our seat. You'll start by clipping into the back and simply just push down so that the front of the seat locks fully in position. And then we can grab our seat back, simply place it in position. As we still have some wiring we're doing currently, we aren't going to fully refasten this yet until we're done with all our wiring. For the next step, we're going to install our front hinge assembly. You'll want to pivot it into position as this locks into the bracket where your seat mount is fastened. So you'll slide that in before pivoting the whole assembly back. Once you have it in position, we can go ahead and loosely fasten it using our M8 button head screws, the same ones we've used before. Then we'll move on to the other fasteners that'll mount the hinge assembly to the vehicle. With our 2 outer mounting bolts started, I'm going to use 2 more button heads that'll fasten your front hinge upper mount bracket to the frame. I'm going to use the same M8 button heads. We'll simply come in here behind our front hinge assembly. Go ahead and get our bolts started before we move on to the next step. For the next step, we're going to go ahead and loosely mount our door onto our hinge brackets. We'll also want to go ahead and latch the latch on our front striker bracket. Once we have our door slid over the hinges, you'll want to simply slide the door skin over the hinges. Once you have them both in position, you'll slide the door back on the brackets before coming in and latching your latch. This will help start your adjustment process. So as you can see here, we can go ahead and move the door around so we get it in a nice position before we come in and fasten our bolts and tighten everything up. With our door in position and our latch latched, if you like the gap all the way around the door, you can go ahead and tighten up your door mounting bolts. We'll use our same Allen wrench, 5mm, and a 13mm socket to go ahead and tighten these up. Once we have them all tight, we can move on to the rear door. With our front door installation complete, we can go ahead and mount our rear door. We'll mount it in the same fashion by sliding it over our hinge mount brackets. Once we have it in position there, we'll go ahead and latch onto our striker bracket. You'll want to make sure that your striker is fully engaged before you go to adjusting. Here you can see we can check our door gap all the way around the plastics. This is a good time to adjust the door forward or back depending on your preference. And we'll go ahead and use the same M8 button heads that we use on the front. With all 4 of your mounting bolts started, we'll go ahead and tighten them all up evenly. For the last step, we're going to go ahead and install our accent panel. These will be offered in custom color to help match your ride. We're going to use our number 8 socket cap screws. You'll be able to simply insert it through the accent panel and through the door before capping it off with a nylon lock nut on the inside. With everything all tight and your doors properly adjusted, you're ready to hit the trails and enjoy your new Thumper Fab half doors for your U10 XL Pro.